Employees face unemployment if they refuse to follow an order they know is wrong, immoral, or perhaps illegal. It is difficult for Christians to take a stand against same-sex marriage when loud voices and the general public demand that we do so. Democratically elected politicians face the end of their career if they take a stand that is unpopular, even when it is the right position. Standing alone, going against the crowd and public opinion is hard. There are risks. You may lose your reputation, your job, or even your life. In Luke 23, we read that Pilate was in that situation. The Jewish leaders incited the crowd to demand the crucifixion of Jesus. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent, but he did not have the courage to do the right thing. He caved and gave the mob what they wanted. It is easy for us to say Pilate was wrong, but do we perform similar acts of cowardice? Are we afraid to stand up for what is right, particularly when there is a cost to do so? The Jewish leaders arrested Jesus, took him to the Sanhedrin, a Jewish body, and declared him guilty of blasphemy. Then they took him before Pilate, the Roman governor, and accused him of tax evasion and treason. When Pilate did not believe those charges, the Jews accused Jesus of stirring up trouble all over Judea and Galilee. Now let's resume reading of Luke 23, verse 6. Now when Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was in Jerusalem in those days. I assume this is the same Herod who beheaded John the Baptist, which we read about in Luke 3. Luke 9 tells us Herod heard about Jesus and was perplexed, wondering who this was. Verse 8. Now when Herod saw Jesus, he rejoiced greatly, for he had wanted to see him for a long time, because he had been hearing about him and was hoping to see some sign performed by him. This tidbit about Herod wanting to see a sign depicts a man who simply wanted to be entertained. Verse 9. And he questioned him at some length, but Jesus answered him nothing. Notice the phrase, at some length. Herod did not simply ask a few questions. He asked many questions. The last word in this verse is nothing. Jesus did not answer any questions. Perhaps Jesus was silent because he knew Herod simply wanted to be entertained. Verse 10. And the chief priests and the scribes were standing there, vehemently accusing him. The word vehemently indicates how much the Jewish leaders hated Jesus. Verse 11. And Herod, with his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking him, dressed him in a bright robe and sent him back to Pilate. Now Herod and Pilate became friends with one another that very day, for before they had been at enmity with each other. The Bible doesn't tell us why they were at enmity, nor why sending Jesus back and forth caused them to become friends. Perhaps they became friends because they both came to the same conclusion about the innocence of Jesus. It may have been because the act of sending Jesus back and forth recognized each other's jurisdiction and authority. They may have felt a kinship due to both having endured the ferocity of the Jewish leaders, knowing they were both in a no-win situation. Verse 13. And Pilate summoned the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and said to them, You brought this man to me as one who incites the people to rebellion, and behold, having examined him before you, I have found in this man no guilt of what you are accusing him. Nor has Herod, for he sent him back to us, and behold, nothing deserving death has been done by him. It is important to know that Pilate knew Jesus was innocent. Pilate knew that Herod also found no guilt in Jesus. Verse 16. Therefore I will punish him and release him. This illustrates how Roman justice had a very unjust mentality. If Jesus was innocent, then he deserved to be released without being punished. In contrast to that, Pilate decided to punish Jesus even though he was innocent. Verse 17. Now he was obliged to release to them at the feast one prisoner. But they cried out all together, saying, Away with this man, and release for us Barabbas. He had been thrown into prison for an insurrection made in the city and for murder. Pilate had a choice between releasing an innocent man named Jesus or a murderer named Barabbas. Verse 20. But again Pilate addressed them, wanting to release Jesus. But they kept on calling out, saying, Crucify! Crucify him! And he said to them a third time, Why? What evil has this man done? I have found no guilt in him worthy of death. Therefore I will punish him and release him. But they were insistent, with loud voices asking that he be crucified, and their voices were prevailing. And Pilate pronounced sentence that their demand be granted. And he released the man they were asking for, who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, but he delivered Jesus to their will. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent, but the demands of the crowd were so strong, he gave in to the mob and condemned an innocent man. On one hand, we can sympathize with Pilate. He was in a no-win situation. As the Roman governor, he was responsible for maintaining peace and order. He knew the Jews might riot if he did not do as they asked, so he gave in to the mob. On the other hand, leaders need to do the right thing. They should not allow vigilante justice. Pilate failed to do the right thing because he did not have the courage to stand up for what was right. It is normal for people to do what Pilate did and go along with a majority. It is hard to buck public opinion. It takes a lot of courage to stand alone. It is difficult for Christians to take a stand against same-sex marriage when loud voices in the general public demand that we do so. Democratically elected politicians face the end of their career if they take a stand that is unpopular, even when it is a right position. Employees face unemployment if they refuse to follow an order they know is wrong, immoral, or perhaps illegal. Today we live in the age of the internet. It is easy to mock and cancel anyone who takes a stand for truth and doing what is right. Despite the risks, Christians need to have courage to stand alone when the moment calls for standing alone. Verse 26. And when they led him away, they took hold of a man, Simon of Cyrene, coming in from the country, and placed on him the cross to carry behind Jesus. And following him was a large multitude of the people, and of women who were mourning and lamenting him. But Jesus, turning to them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, stop crying for me, but cry for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, Cover us. Jesus predicted that someday life will be so bad, people will ask the hills and mountains to fall on them and kill them. This has probably happened multiple times over the centuries. It will definitely happen during the tribulation period. Verse 31. For if they do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry? Now 2 others also, who were criminals, were being led away to be put to death with him. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent, but the demands of the crowd were so strong, he gave in to the mob and condemned an innocent man. On one hand, Pilate was in a no-win situation. On the other hand, leaders need to do the right thing. Pilate failed to do the right thing because he did not have the courage to stand up for what was right. It is normal for people to do what Pilate did and go along with a majority. Today, we live in the age of the internet. It is easy to mock and cancel anyone who takes a stand for truth and doing what is right. However, despite the risks, Christians need to have courage. We need to stand alone when the moment calls for it. We need to be willing to stand up for truth and do the right thing, even when there is a cost to do so. Thanks for visiting Bible Mountain. If you have already joined my email list, thank you, and please tell others about Bible Mountain. If you have not joined my email list yet, please do so now. In order to join, go to BibleMountain.com, click on subscribe, and that will take you to a page where you can sign up. Your email address will not be sold nor given away. Once again, thanks for visiting Bible Mountain.